right, this is the 68th Coffee with the Commissioner. Welcome, good morning, thanks for being here. Lots to talk about, and we have some really important issues to discuss. And before we get into our county update, I just want to give a warm welcome to Mr. Jay Faison. He is in the lower right of your screen. He is the founder of Flood Defenders, which is an organization dedicated to helping communities be more resilient in the face of I guess climate change and other things. Jay, good morning, and thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Good morning, my pleasure. You guys are motivated. I like it.
Well, we try to be. It's 6:30. You got to get things going. All right, before we get to our guests this morning and our discussion about floodwater, there's a lot going on in Escambia County with COVID-19. We've seen a dramatic increase in hospitalizations, and we had a big discussion on last Thursday with Health Department Director Marie Mott. So without further ado, before we get to West Marino and an update from the county, Eric, what would you like to tell us from public safety's perspective? I know we're having people call the ambulances for testing and crazy stuff like that. So what's going on in public safety?
Yes, sir. Good morning first. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So we are seeing a uptick, well, a sharp decline in our positivity rate. So we're getting a lot of positives in the community with the Omicron variant. We are hospitalization rates again as of yesterday morning, and the hospitals report to us every morning, Monday through Friday. Every morning, Monday through Friday, we was at a total of 106 patients in the hospitals being treated with COVID. We have a weekly meeting with our hospital partners, hospitals, the health department, and public safety here. And what we're hearing is that while there's that many in the hospital, there's not that many on vents. I think they said there was around 4 people in all the hospitals on ventilators at that point in time. So our vents are not going up, and they have plenty of capacity for ventilators. The equipment is there. They assured us that they're fine on ventilators. That is not the issue. And we have seen a slow uptick in the hospitalization rates. Compared to the Delta variant, where we saw a sharp increase once we started seeing a positivity rate, the Delta variant, it just slammed our hospitals. And that's why we're tracking the hospitalization rates with our dashboard to show the public what's going on. As I said, we did have an uptick in the hospitalizations, but it's not as sharp as we have had it in the past. With that, we're having people call the 911 system, our EMS system, because they've tested positive for COVID. Okay, you've tested positive for COVID. We get to your house and you're standing good on room air. You've got, good vitals. You've got no other complaints other than maybe I've got a dull headache or I've got some a little bit of congestion, and they're wanting to go to the hospital. Well, there's not much the hospital is going to do for you at that point. And we try to educate them on what do you expect the hospital to do at that point? They think there's something that can be done. Well, it's kind of like you just got to let it run its course at that point in time. But we transport them to the hospital anyway, which compounds the waiting room, and then they sit in there for 8 hours. So we're getting those calls that, one, I need to get tested. I feel bad, and I feel like I've got COVID. I need to go to the hospital to get tested. So they're calling the EMS system for that. And then they're calling the EMS system because I have COVID and I'm not feeling that great. So we're having those issues. We're trying to educate the public on, hey, you may have COVID, but if your vitals and you're standing good and everything, you're not having severe respiratory problems, you're not passing out, losing consciousness. Those are things that you would need to call us for if you're having those acute issues. But we're getting a lot of calls with that on top of our daily calls, falls, accidents, and then things of that nature. So the hospitals are being overran because people are seeking treatment for something that the hospital can't do a whole lot about if you don't have severe enough symptoms to, be admitted into the hospital. So we just want the public to know that yes, we are having an Omicron uptick. The positivity rate is going up, but the severity of our hospitalization rates for being admitted in the hospital is not met like Delta did in the past. So, but the hospitals did want me to relay to you that ventilators, they're good, and that not many people are on ventilators. There's not that severe of acuity with this Omicron in the hospitalization rates.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic to hear. And one of the discussion points that we had at Thursday's meeting, Eric, was on the dashboard. Are we going to start indicating that? Because I think that's a great point that you make. Before, one of the data points we captured was the number of ICU beds, the number of ventilators, and the percentage that were used. The raw numbers, which is great. I'm glad we have it. But I think if we could drill down and have that level of detail on the dashboard that any county resident can punch in and kind of see where we're at in real time, I think that would help. I always think recoveries are good, although I don't even know if that's applicable because this seems to be such a mild well, I say that, I mean, from what we're hearing anecdotally from South Africa, United Kingdom, Denmark, other places, and now in America, New York, they say that the cases are coming down, and that they're not as severe, not as many deaths. But are we going to add some additional data points to our dashboard? And if so, how can we do that?
No, absolutely. The hospital, after having a general discussion with them, they felt like it was not even warranted. It's not even a point to even, they didn't feel like it was, because they said that they have plenty of equipment, plenty of capacity, and they're just not seeing it. So they felt like it wasn't warranted, that the inpatient hospitalization rate is what they want to go off of, just to show that we're not getting slammed like we did in the last variant. So
Right on, right on. And then the number of deaths, it's been static, less than 10. I guess,
yes.
Is that accurate? I mean, people want to know.
As far as we know, it's what the CDC is reporting. And I'm trying to see what the state of Florida and what kind of data points they're doing to correlate the two, to make sure that we are actually tracking right. I don't have that answer. I can't tell you with 100% confidence that is absolutely right, but I have heard of fatalities due to the Omicron variant as rampant as we did during Delta. I'll be honest with you.
Okay, well, that's good. I think that's all real good news. Thank you for the update. Thanks for being here. There's a lot more we could talk about, and when we will. But before we do, we're going to go over to Wes Marino. Wes is our county administrator. Good morning. Welcome for being. Thanks for being here. And what would you like to tell us about what's happening in the county today?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hey, we're in the new year, so we've adopted a motto: "We're in gear in the new year." That's where we're at.
Hey, it rhymes.
Yeah, we got our feet back under us. We're coming out of the holiday sludge, if you will. Everybody's up and running. Have a lot of good things going. We have a new waste services director that is on board. He is actually here now. Very qualified. We look for great things out of him in waste services. He's already got a plan in place, and he's already hit the ground running. We recently hired a finance director, and that'll be Mr. Stephen Hall. And we're looking forward to having him on board. He comes on the 24th, and he and I have been in many discussions, and we've got a plan. We've got a plan for our finance department, and you know, we're about mid-January almost, so it's time to get on the budget. And so we're going to be moving through the first part of the year, working with the budget and seeing where we land at. We are putting together an ambubus there in EMS. That's kind of exciting, something good there. On this coming agenda, you know, as you well know, there'll be an item of a discussion to hire a search firm for a permanent county administrator. So, you know, I think that's a positive thing for us as we move forward. And then I know we have Joy Jones on the call here with us. And Joy, I think this might be your last meeting coming up. Joy's getting ready to retire February the 2nd. And she and I go back a long ways. And I'm happy for her, but I hate to see her go as well. She's always been a big help to me, and she does a great job there in engineering. We still are struggling with some recruitment issues. And so, you know, we got a lot of work to do in that area. Purchasing, I had some discussions yesterday afternoon with some folks regarding purchasing and standing it back up and getting it back to the level it needs to be at. And then in corrections and public work, we still have a lot of struggles there recruiting. So we're going to continue to work on those issues. And, you know, we're not going to slow down. I'm still positive. I'm optimistic about where we're headed in the direction the county's headed in. And I think we're going to be just fine. We're going to be great, honestly, in my opinion, as we move through the year. So that's just a brief synopsis of kind of where we've been at.
Yeah, I appreciate the update, and thank you, Wes. A couple of questions I want to tag on. First, I received a text message this morning from the union, the ECAT union, and it's my understanding that we lost one of our drivers to COVID. Is that your understanding as well?
We actually did. We actually did. Mary Ann Staton, and 26-year employee, and she kind of had some struggles there, you know, in the latter part. But we're sorry to hear that. We certainly wish her family condolences. I think the service is actually this afternoon. 26-year employee, a great employee, never had any issues at all. Always just came to work and did a great job for the community. You know, would buy clothes and toys for the children around the holidays. Just always involved in her community, and she's going to be greatly missed.
Do we know? Was this a recent infection? I mean, is this an Omicron infection? Do we know, or had she been fighting it, or do you know?
I'm not really sure if it's Omicron or something else. I know she'd been battling it for quite some time. And in between there, I think she may have suffered another injury unrelated to COVID that may have set her back a little bit. But yeah, the COVID is actually, the COVID complications is actually what happened with her.
Well, it's horrible, and my thoughts and prayers go out to her family. That's a tough job. You're there and you're confined in a space with people all day long. I mean, it's a difficult thing to go through. And the other thing that's going on in the city that might impact us, Wes, and I've had a question here online, and I had someone else ask me to ask you this. So they're going to kick out, or they're going to remove the homeless people from under the bridge. There's over 100 of them. Do we know? Does the county? Is there any inkling that you think they're going to try and move them out to the county? Have you heard?
I have not specifically heard that. I do know they are buying some hotel and motel vouchers, for the city is, for some of the folks that are under the I-110 bridge. What the long-term plan is for all of those folks, I really have not heard. Nobody has really reached out to me anyway to have any discussions. There may be some folks that have reached out to other board members, but they certainly haven't reached out to me. So, I guess some of my questions regarding that, I understand the hotel vouchers and the motel vouchers, but how long is that for, and what is the plan to manage those facilities, and some of the rules. I think we've had some discussions about some of those things. What is going to be the rules coming into the facility, who's going to manage the facility, and for how long are these vouchers good for? So there's a lot of questions there. I know there's a lot of good intentions to help some of the folks there under the I-110 bridge, but we'll just have to see how that moves going forward.
All right. Well, I just know, there was the move to bring them out to District 1 in the county on Houston Avenue. And thankfully that got squashed, because that was a horrible idea that was never going to go anywhere. And I'm thankful that it didn't. I mean, we all have compassion for these folks, but there's a tremendous amount of misbehavior, let's use that word, happening out there. And I've heard some of it firsthand in terms of folks defecating in public, urinating purposely in front of women in front of their houses, dumping shopping carts full of bags full of feces. I mean, the drug abuse, calls for service from the Pensacola Police Department. You're not, of course, the news isn't talking about that, but I'm hearing there's multiple calls per week, up to a dozen or more, for assaults, things like this. So, the idea to move them out to a residential area, I think, is a horrible idea, and I'm glad it's not going to happen. I feel bad for the folks, but I've said this before we get to floodwater, I think we need to find them an area out in the woods. You bus them out to the woods, you bring portable classrooms, you bring their services out there, the counseling, job prep, education, whatever, clinical stuff, medical, and then you bus them once a day down to the transit center so they can give them a bus pass, let them ride the bus where they need to go, and you bus them back out into the woods. But if you make it comfortable for them and you put them in a neighborhood, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing. They're going to keep drinking mouthwash or whatever dysfunctional stuff they're going to do. And believe me, no one would want that in their neighborhood. And when the city wanted to bring them out to District 1, my question was, well, why don't we move them down to Bayview Park? Why don't we put them in East Hill? Of course, we know the reasons why. They don't want them there. We love people. We want to help people. But, at some point you cannot bring it out to a suburban area. Otherwise, you're going to wreck people. And so I'm glad that didn't happen. We hope that the city has a good plan for it, but we certainly don't want them just shuffling a problem out to the county. I'll get off the pedestal now, but we do have guests here this morning, and Jay Faison is here. We've got Chris Kerb from Flood Defenders, and we have, as you mentioned, Wes, we've got Joy Jones, who's been with the county. Joy, how many years have you been with the county?
A little over 17.
17 years. And of course, you're going to be retiring at the end of the month. I appreciate you coming on this morning. So from this point forward, I want to talk about one of the most important things. When I walked neighborhoods in 2015, 2016 to win my first term on the board, it was two issues that people, when I went and knocked on their door and met with them at their front door, on their front porch, two issues: traffic and stormwater infrastructure. They wanted to know, because Pensacola gets a lot of rain. In fact, last year, it's my understanding we got 20 inches more than normal, and we normally get like 80 inches a year. It's amazing the amount of rain that we get. We get more rain than Seattle. Everyone thinks of Seattle rainy. Pensacola is a rainy place. So that was the issue. And then, of course, as I got on the board, I learned more about what had happened. We were all coming fresh off of the 2014 inundation that we had. So that's a big issue. And it's tough because I know, Joy, we have a ton of projects, but funding is the issue. Now, that's where Flood Defenders, I believe, comes in. And I want to give the opportunity to Jay Faison for a couple of things. First of all, what are Flood Defenders and why did you start this organization, Jay?
Well, thanks for having me, Jeff. And I'm glad we're having this discussion. Chris has done a lot of work down there, and we're trying real hard to fulfill our mission. So what Flood Defenders does is it gives a powerful voice to flood affected citizens. Normally people, when they get flooded, they're not sure why they got flooded. They're not sure who's responsible. They're not sure how it gets fixed, unless it's a major storm and FEMA comes in, and of course, that's wrought with problems itself. So that's what Flood Defenders is all about. I'm actually a business guy like you, sold his business and became a philanthropist. And I've been focused on flooding for about the last 4 years. I'm actually sort of the interim director of Flood Defender, but I'm involved also with other groups like the American Flood Coalition as chairman, the First Street Foundation, which is a leading private data provider for flooding in the country. And we're doing a lot in Tallahassee to pass legislation, which is I know Escambia is participating in, trying to get some funding from DEP. So I'm involved in sort of flooding soup to nuts. And I think the reason is, one, I've had family kind of wiped out in the big storms in Eastern North Carolina, and been down there mucking houses and seeing the devastation that occurs. A lot of people jump in during that moment of need. But then once the storm waters recede, everybody goes about their business, and there's not a lot of nonprofits working in this space on flood protection. In fact, very, very few. And in fact, if you look at it from a national level, there's really nobody in charge. If you look at it from a state level, until recently, until we've got a new chief resiliency officer in Florida, there's nobody in charge. And if you look at it at the county level or the city level, many times there's nobody really in charge. And so it's confusing, it's cross-jurisdictional, it's a big mess, and it's getting a lot worse. And so that's what I'm trying to provide better flood protection for people sort of writ large. So why Escambia County? Well, your rainfall statistics, you're the rainiest place in the country, according to NOAA data. You in Lower Alabama, all around sort of that part of the Gulf. And the rainfall data is getting worse. Your extreme storm events are increasing pretty rapidly. Your high intensity hurricanes driven by warmer waters in the Gulf are getting more frequent, not the low intensity events, but the high intensity events. And then, small increases in sea levels bottle up your rivers. And also, so these are compounding effects. And so you're looking at a progressively worse situation. And we want to help address that.
Now, Jay, you're incredibly modest, and you appear to be very self-deprecating. Now, you kind of glossed over, your resume, but I'm aware that you had a very, very successful tech company. You sold it for a tremendous sum of money. So, I guess the layperson would ask. I mean, you could be on a beach somewhere with a like Thurston Howe with a coconut and but you're I mean, and it's great what you're doing. It's great what you're doing. But a lot of folks would just naturally be suspicious. They would say, hey, well, wait, why isn't he outsourcing this? Why didn't he have some guy do it? He's doing it himself. So is it because you had a family member directly impacted? Is that why the passion is there?
I mean, yes, that when you're on the ground and you have that visceral effect of people, in tears over their life savings going away, it does make an impact. I'm also a data guy. I like to look at facts and numbers, and the numbers around flooding are terrible. And in your county, you're the second. Monroe County is the only county that has more claims per person than you do. And so,
right.
There's a lot of reasons to be here. There's logical reasons and there's emotional reasons. I would say there's a blend of both.
Well, and I would say this, you had sent me a link to your site, and you have an interesting interactive tool. Tell the viewers about that, how they get to it, and is it just Escambia County, or do you have that for other areas of the state and the nation?
Well, I've found a great entrepreneur who left the weather company as vice president of marketing at 30 years old. He's just one of these, crazy talents whose brother was in Canadian politics and he wanted to do good and didn't care about building wealth. And so we've built First Street Foundation together. First Street Foundation's chief data officer, interestingly, used to run data for NOAA. He was the chief information officer for NOAA, the largest data aggregator in the world. And so, fast forward to today, they are sort of the preeminent flood modeler in the country. They'll be launching Fire in April, but they're on Realtor.com, they're on Redfin, hope to get on Zillow this year. So you can go to floodfactor.com, their tool, look up your address. You can look up a county, you can look up the state, you can type in Pensacola, and you'll find reports for all of it. And if you look at, you look at the county, which I sent you that report, it's sobering in the extreme.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you just go to Flood Factor, enter your address, it's free. And the county can also buy the data. I could probably work out a free deal.
Come on now, hook us up now. Come on.
But at least that would give you, and because I'm not clear on the county's plan. I know you have 18 out of 42 basins mapped. I know most of those basin studies are old, but there's no dashboard for the county that I can see on where you are and where you're going. And
No,
at least so what this would do is at least say, okay, here's where the hot spots are. They need to be ground truthed before we got to capital improvement plans, which I know you're working on, but it's a good, the state of South Carolina has bought it. The city of Pittsburgh's bought it. So we are, I'm not selling my book here because I wouldn't, or maybe I am, but it is, we are pushing, we think it's a tool that cities and engineering firms can use and save a lot of time and effort.
Well, okay, that's a great segue. And Chris, you had sent me a spreadsheet, and of course I had seen that spreadsheet before, and it's, we have to update every year in June. And there's a lot of projects, when you go all the way to the right, it's red, awaiting funding. So Joy, who is it on in the engineering department that compiles that and submits that? Is that Rob McCracken or is that Rosa?
It is Rob McCracken. He's taken the lead on that. And we do know our needs, and Chris was instrumental in putting that together back in 2015. We know that we have over 200 needs in drainage that have been identified through those basin studies, the older ones, of course, as Jay said. They do need updates. And every day we learn about other needs. So we get about 4.4 million a year through the LOST, and that doesn't go very far every year. So we could use more money.
If we could wave a magic wand, Joy, how much would it take? I mean, some of those projects, 3 million, 2 million, 3 million, as I was going through that spreadsheet, if I had a magic wand and could give you the money you needed to solve all the problems? I know
it depends on when you want to get it done. So
well, that's exactly right.
420 million. If you did a 30-year plan, you need about 17 million a year to touch those. Of course, the cost goes up as you go. We have more that, jump on the lists as we go along and storms happen. So I would say 17 a year. We get about 17 through LOST, but we're doing bridges and transportation and all of that. Our best year has probably been 40 million on all projects if we're fully staffed. So based on the staff, we have a lot of vacancies right now.
Yes.
But if we were fully staffed, we could probably run 40 million through the door. Now, 50% of that might be drainage, so.
Well, I mean, it's a sobering number when you talk about 400 million to solve the existing problems. One of the things that I saw yes, Jay. Yes, sir. You're right.
Well, the 400 million is a 2015 number based on old data. And by the way, Joy and Wes and team, like, my heart goes out to you guys because you guys are trying to do already almost impossible work with limited budgets. And so none of this is an attack on staff, because I know you all are doing the best you can with the money you have. And I would like to see a lot more money at all levels in flooding, but just to be clear on the actual numbers, 415 is a finger in the wind. And given inflation and where you are today in labor rate increases and construction costs, and if you updated the data, who knows where you'd be? I mean, you could be
Right.
$1 billion. We don't know. You don't know. We don't know.
It's
Right. So-
totally a dynamic list and a dynamic need. Changes
Yeah.
every day.
Well, one of the things I noticed when I came on board was there was a lot of pre-existing issues. It appeared that there were subdivisions that were built in wetlands that perhaps never should have been, particularly off of Highway 98, north of 98, areas of Bellevue, off of Bellevue Avenue. I mean, you just walking door to door. I'm walking through, it hadn't rained and the yards are all wet. And you talk to folks and they show you the backyard. So it's an existing problem that didn't develop overnight. And so that's where I would come to folks like Chris and Jay. I would ask them this: you're passionate, you've got your issue. It's stormwater flooding. And we're passionate about it too, but however, we've got multiple plates, multiple straws all over the place. I mean, we've got to provide, services for businesses, parks and rec. We've got transportation, roads, bridges. We're in multiple pots. So it would require an inordinate amount of resources to fully 100% fund this. So I would just simply ask you guys this: what would you do different? I mean,
Let me jump in on this one. From a number standpoint, and Chris, because I know you've heard from Chris. I watched your city council meetings and testimony, and Chris has done a fabulous job. And I'm not sure we've covered the really sort of at a high level the money part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of my background. But so we gave Escambia what we thought was a fair. We try to give a fair grade to the county on our 4 pillars of plan, protect, invest, repair. And I just sent the link in the chat here.
Okay.
And by the way, the American Society of Stormwater Engineers, or the American Society of Civil Engineers, gives stormwater in the US a D. So you're average. And you're underfunded. And so it's not really, you might be with the money you have, you might be getting an A. But regardless, if you look at the actual results, the amount of flooding, et cetera, you're average. But America's doing a pretty poor job across the board. But in planning, right? So what's happening in Tallahassee, and I'll just put a pin in this if we want to come back to it, because there's a lot of money out there today. There's 30 billion new dollars coming through to flooding through the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
And there's about 1.5 that's either going to come through or highly likely to come through the state. There's $100 million that's already been cut off in December. There'll be a lot more this session. So if you have a good plan, you can get a lot more money. Louisiana as a state has gotten 5 times more than Florida with 20% of the population because they have a really good plan. If you have a really good plan, and I can help on that, right? Because
that's great.
We're highly involved. So you got to get a plan, and it's got to be up to date according to the new rules. It's got to use new, fresh data, et cetera.
Well, one of the things, let me ask you a quick question there, Jay, because one of the things we get pinged on is we get a lot of things going, a lot of projects going. We do this study, that study, because we're not like a private business. I mean, we've got to jump through hoops of fire. If it touches any federal land, we got to do NEPA, we got to do all these things. And so if we don't have the funding, it's almost, you put money out, you're taking a gamble. So what do you mean ready to go? Because we got a spreadsheet with lots of projects ready to go, but
you have a 2015 spreadsheet on a capital improvement plan that was built on old basin studies then. Mm-hmm. And you might get funding on a lot of that. I need to look at the DEP submissions that you made. It's very, very complicated, but at the end of the day, if you're not investing in planning, you're probably not going to get as much money as you can. So let's keep it at there's got lots of government money out there today where there wasn't 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Again, the infrastructure bill that passed in December was the largest infrastructure bill in history. And so a lot of that's going to go to flooding, and the people with the best plans are going to get they're going to get more money. So you have to invest in that, and you have to invest in staff, and capability and grant writers, and, pay your ISF consultant and ICF consultant to do these things. Again, then that's back to budgets. But if you looked at you could get 100-to-1 payback on that investment. And again, we can go down in the weeds in that if you'd like. But that's the first piece.
I just think from a high level perspective, I know in my district alone, we've got multiple projects, just excruciatingly slow to get the studies done. and the planning and the design done, because there's a finite number of engineers available, particularly at discipline and that specialty locally. And so it's just Dunaway Lane, Frittinger. I've got the money. We're just waiting. I mean, waiting, and I asked about it. So I somewhat think that if we had a sudden windfall, it's like, be careful what you wish for, because you're not going to be able to execute it because you don't have enough engineers to do the plans quickly enough. Now, I mean, in a perfect world, I want all the money I can get, but $100 million divided by 67 counties doesn't give Escambia County not even 1 year's worth. So what would you say to the, and I'm not trying to be confrontational, I'm just being devil's advocate. So 100 million divided by 67, what does that do for us?
Well, I think this is the problem with flooding, right? Because flooding is a long-term problem. It requires long-term planning and a perspective and a North Star we shoot to and drive towards. There are going to be bumps on the road. There are going to be labor shortages. There's going to be complexities. But if we don't have if there's no point on the horizon we're shooting for, and we're just funding neighborhood by neighborhood based on who squawks the most, we might not even be solving the problem at all. Because sometimes when you fix one neighborhood and you fix a watershed upstream, you're actually infecting the one downstream to the negative who didn't have the wherewithal to pull the strings with the council to get the money. And so
That's true.
it's super dysfunctional today. And I guess in general, and that's sort of like everywhere. And it's a really hard problem, this flooding thing, because we need to take a more rational, comprehensive approach. Yes, there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road. But again, if you look at if you look at Harris County, Texas, and there's some good examples, and you look at lower Louisiana and the coastal management plan, or you look at Iowa and this flood center and the planning they're doing, they're out punching their weight. They're actually fixing a lot of problems. They're doing it at a watershed level. They're lowering flood risk because they're taking a very pragmatic and planned approach. And that's where, but you can't do that with super limited budgets and you're going to need to raise salaries, hire qualified people, staff up, hire the grant folks. You can get grants from the state to do a lot of the technical work, but you gotta have the staff.
Yeah.
And that's a real hurdle.
It is a real hurdle in every department, Jay. I mean, I don't, I wonder how things are in North Carolina, but here the dynamic is a lot of folks have left the workforce and they don't want to work.
Yeah, but you're paying $13 for a CDL, employee, a licensed employee, and other folks are paying 17. And
right.
That was from being on the ground in November, and maybe that's changed, and maybe y'all have increased it. I just don't understand how, I look, you have challenges in the economy. I mean, the Fed and others say the problem will alleviate second half of the year. I don't have any idea. I'm not a crystal ball, but you have to have, I think we have to have a plan in place that makes sense to solve the problem over the long term. One thing that's guaranteed, it will get worse.
Yeah. Oh, no question. No question.
On your current path, you're guaranteed to have either a medium, bad or very bad or terrible. Like you're going to be on that trajectory, and how you sort of lay out your long-term vision plan and start executing, because it's going to get competitive, by the way.
Right.
You're going to be competing with, and we're working with other counties. Mm-hmm. You're going to be competing with other counties. A lot of them have more money, and they're going to have good plans. They're going to make it easy for DEP or FEMA or HUD or whoever's got the Corps, who's now got a bunch of money to put out. They're going to make it easy for them to give money. And you guys,
well, we certainly want to be in that group.
You're not going to make it easy, and you're going to underperform on your current path.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why we're having the conversation. And we do have these conversations. And matter of fact, we're having a meeting soon with another neighborhood that's been inundated with partially a state problem with the drainage along one of the roads, and partially some things that we've done. But it's a challenging problem. And one of the things that we've done is we were the last county in the state, I believe, that we were engineering our ponds to a 25-year standard. Correct me, Joy, if I'm wrong. And we finally joined the rest of the world and went to a 100-year standard. Joy, in your opinion, do we need to make it? I mean, because what we're doing now is we're focusing on all these problems that were created by our predecessors, right? And it's not an excuse, it's just the reality. Whether it's lift stations that were not built properly and neighborhoods are having to pay for it, or retention ponds that are failing and homeowners associations are not equipped with dealing with it. Do we need to really up our standards? What do you think, Joy? What's your opinion? As you're leaving, I mean, you're free to speak.
Well, I think we need to meet our standards first, and we don't necessarily do that. And like you said, there's a lot of maintenance needs that need to happen on the public and the private side, and they're hard to do. They've always been hard to do because we've got so much land to cover and so many people to do it. So
Right.
it's, like I said, it's dynamic. It's always going to happen. We're never going to solve it. We got to just keep working the plan, keep doing our best with what we have to work with. The grants are great. We grabbed about 10 million this year, using it for drainage, but it does take time and it takes people to put those applications in. The deadlines are short. You have to hustle, and that takes you off other things to do that. So,
Right. And then the reporting requirements after the fact, I'm sure, are pretty rigorous as well. Chris, go ahead.
One of the problems I'm seeing when you're talking about design standards, a 100-year storm may be sufficient, but the whole state of Florida is using 1960s rainfall data to do stormwater designs with, and there's data available that is not being used.
And why do you think that is, Chris?
Well, it costs more money if you're having 2 or 3 more inches of rain for a 100-year storm to do a storm system.
No. I mean, why is it? Do you believe the state of Florida is not using the most recent?
Well, I can answer that question because this should be fixed this session. We have language. We're working with the speaker's office. We have language where DOT has to use up-to-date rainfall data. We have to have that into law at the end of session.
Okay.
Why has it not been focused on? Because nobody's asked for it.
Wow.
Which is mind-blowing, but
That is.
but I've spent a lot of time in Tallahassee. I've talked to a lot of people and nobody seems to have asked for it.
Wow.
Now, Congress
maybe-
is also updating their NOAA evaluations or rainfall statistics too. Congress just approved that in the infrastructure.
We're working a lot. This is sort of like this is my biggest pet project, is trying to fix the data problem. So we work on it at the federal level and working on it at the state level, and we're making good progress.
No, this is good. Now, this is a great conversation, and I always like to look at it from, and I hate to say it, it's kind of myopic, but from my seat where I sit, because again, we have multiple issues. We can't hire corrections guards. We don't have enough people on the roads crew. We've got 300 or 400 openings, and and it's not just about pay. When at the federal level, I do believe that it's not as innocent as, well, they make this. I think when they're paying people not to work, it creates challenges, not just for Escambia County, but for the entire country. So we've got a very low unemployment rate, but we've got a very low labor participation rate. So when Joy talks about not being able to hire critical, staff to do these things, we have difficulty, fielding these staff. It's a challenging problem that we didn't create. So that's number one. I mean, I'm certainly the first guy that will own a problem that I create, but when, we're held to a finite budget, we don't get to print money like Washington does. We're held to a finite budget. And then of course, on the other end of it, we've got a sword at our neck not to raise taxes. So,
can we drill down on the money part though? That's where I think you're hitting on exactly this is the nail on the head right here. Right?
Okay.
It's money.
It's all about money.
It's
Yeah,
all
I hate to
about
say
money.
it is.
It's all
It
about
is.
money. You gotta get the money. You're not gonna have the money or whatever, right?
Well,
Yes,
we have people,
Jay,
Jay, we have people, you're a bit,
people, but is that forever? Is that now? Who knows? We can argue about all that, but at the end of the
Right.
day, you've got $4 million for capital improvement. You've got your budget for stormwater. You're understaffed you don't have enough inspectors. You don't have enough maintenance people. You don't have enough planners. You don't have a grammar. It's a money problem.
I just disagree. I disagree with you.
You disagree.
It's not simply a money problem. We don't have the people to do it.
Is it
And
half?
It's not just,
Can we say it's half a money problem?
maybe, yeah.
On the $4 million, of capital improvement, I mean, I think we could say that that's more than 50% of money problem. We could contract that out. If we had 10 million, Joy, I think could you spend 10 million in flood projects if you had 10 million in flood?
not with the vacancies. If we were fully staffed, yes, I would say we could.
So we can't do it until we have the project management to even do the projects.
Yeah, it's hard to get people.
Well, I want to talk
We need
about
good
configuration.
applicants. And we can work
Hold the
with,
tent.
hiring them at a higher rate. We get that leeway. They're just not applying.
Yeah.
Well, you're
Well,
under,
if,
the rates that I asked about when I went down there, you're low compared to the market. Is that true in a lot of cases, some cases?
I would not say for the professionals.
Okay,
Professionals, they can come in and that's negotiable.
got it.
Well, one of the things that folks want us to do is when we talk about raising standards, we went from the 25 to the 100-year, standard for the ponds. If we go higher, the more of these rigorous requirements that we add, the one thing it does is the home builders are never going to take the hit. They're always going to pass their costs on to the customers. So that increases the price of housing. We do have another crisis that when you squeeze a balloon on one side, it doesn't just stay static on the other. We all know that. So when we start adding all these requirements on the developers, you're just increasing the cost of the houses. So, I know your issue's floods and stormwater, but if we do these things, if we raise the salaries, we've got to come up with the revenue. And if we make the developers pay a lot more, the houses are going to cost more, and that's going to exacerbate a problem that we have. Rents are out of control here. We were typically, always have been since I grew up here, a very affordable community to live in. Our rents are ridiculous right now. People can't find housing. So what would you say to folks who would say, look, that all sounds great on paper, make the standards more rigorous, make sure everything's engineered, to a 500-year storm. But by the way, the houses are going to be $100,000 more a piece. How do you solve that problem?
Well,
Millage, right?
your balance sheet. I mean, I've had a consultant look at your balance sheet and your revenues and stuff. And I think there is, cost of money out there is so cheap, and there's financial engineering to do. I think there could be bond referendums. There's a lot of, there are different levers to pull.
Sure.
And so, but if you could invest $1, okay, I think you would get 100 back. If the city would put up, let's say you put up $1 to get a better, where you had to pay more to get a project manager. And I realize that's not only the problem, but to increase staff, right, to participate in this money distribution that is going to occur at scale, right? What's the return on that investment? I mean, it's probably like 100 to 1, number one. Number two, when you put $1 in of taxpayer money, you can leverage it, 20, 30, 40 to 1 in the bond market. And also you can get state and federal matching and that takes more staff as well. But the return on investment on each additional dollar is huge. The developers, I've heard, we're not talking, I mean, impact fees are very unpopular to the building community, and I get that. So, but that's not the only lever. We haven't talked about protect, the second pillar, which is don't make flooding worse when you build. I feel like the first thing you do is stop building in places that are going to flood. And your Oak Lawn or whatever, where you just didn't have the inspector inspect to the code anyway. Like, so that's another, what's the return on that investment? Because now we're talking about whatever that drainage study shows, multi-millions of dollars, where we shouldn't have put the development there in the first place.
No disagreement there. No disagreement there.
So,
and it's not only the inspectors
there's
though. Can I say it? It's not only the inspectors or them not being there and not enough of them, but the developer's contractor needs to do the right thing and not try to cut the corners,
Yeah, and that happens a lot. That's a key thing, Joy, you and I have talked about. It's one thing for an engineer to come in and say, this is engineered, and if it's done this way, it's not gonna be a problem. But if the contractor doesn't build it to the way it was engineered, and no one knows that, then what good was it? Because it's going to flood. And I think we've seen that happen in Escambia County, Florida as well. I mean, I know we've had.
It happens.
Yeah. And so I think that's where the county can do a better job. I believe that we could do a better job with that.
But you need more staff to do that with, and you got to fund those staff members.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I will tell you, I mean,
Let me jump in about, we've made great strides this past year in wages and in recruitment. Our public works department, we were paying $12.49 an hour for an entry-level CDL position. And we were able to raise that to $16.72 an hour coming in. That's a significant increase. And above that, you know, as you move up the line, we raised all those salaries for all those positions. And so we have a heavy interest in recruiting. We've done that with fire, you know, the same thing with fire, $10,000 a year increase in the entry level firefighter to try to bring them in.
Yep.
Same thing with EMS, same thing with facilities and parks and other areas. And we're still shorthanded. But, you know, one of the things from a maintenance standpoint is just about every board meeting, we accept a final plat. When we accept the final plat, we're accepting more ponds, we're accepting more asphalt, more curb and gutter, more drainage structures. And so, you know, we're being down 40, 50 people in public works. The maintenance effort is great, and it is definitely a challenge. So in that regard, yeah, we are kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit. But, you know, honestly, you know, I've been at this a long time. If we were fully staffed in public works, I think we'd be okay. I think, you know, we're bringing in new equipment, you know, a great push for new equipment there, and that's a great effort. But I would also say this when it comes to drainage, and I know Chris is aware of this and Joy, you know, since LOST2, we've invested quite a bit of money in drainage projects and putting infrastructure in the ground. And my observation is that the events like 2014 in a Hurricane Sally type event, we're not going to be able to design our way out of those events.
Nope. No matter what you do.
I will also say that during those events, if you look at the areas where we've invested LOST dollars into drainage infrastructure, those areas did fairly well during those extreme events. So, you know, yes, we have a long ways to go, but I believe we have also came a long ways from where we were, at least since my involvement in engineering in the early 2000s or late 2000s. So I think we made great strides. I think we have a long ways to go. Some of the areas you see are where subdivisions were built in floodplains.
Yeah, they
you know,
were.
it's hard to mitigate some subdivision built in a floodplain. But we have absolutely, I think, made some great strides. We have a lot more work to do, but I think we have come a long ways.
Well, thank you for that, Wes, and I appreciate that. And I will say, as it pertains to flood defenders, Chris, you know, you come to the meetings, and I just appreciate the way that you guys have approached that. I mean, it's not like wagging your finger in our face, and you know, because we're all, I mean, really, there's not one of us up there that doesn't want to help to the extent that we can, but it's, you know, the money's got to go a lot of different ways. There's bridges that are unsafe right now that people are driving over every single day. Imagine if one of those collapses and a family's in a SUV. I mean, you know, so there's a lot of different priorities, but any way that flood defenders can help us, I'm willing to listen. I've got multiple flood projects in my district going right now. I got one where the backyards, Jay, were collapsing into a ditch, and it sat that way. I had a constituent call me. I went out there. They said, no one's done anything. No one has done anything. I brought staff out there. Joy and her team got us a grant, and we're going to complete that project in March, and those backyards are getting put back together. And so, but I mean, it's one small victory at a time. I would just say I don't think there's any way to do it all very, very quickly. But I think if we continue to make steady progress on the stuff that was broken before, while at the same time holding developers accountable to meeting the standards that we put before them when we give them development orders, I think that's the combination. And just knowing that the government moves glacially slow, you know, I don't know what else could be done. Your thoughts on that?
Can I ask you one question? Like,
Sure.
and this is to Joy and Wes and team. Is it worthwhile to try to get a comprehensive county plan that's up to date, that has the hydrology, the H&H studies that are up to date by the basins that are in trouble, and then an up-to-date capital improvement plan that is ready to go for state and federal money? Is that a worthwhile effort?
I think it is, in my personal opinion. Of course, we've been doing this I've been doing it for 25 years, and those basin studies are awesome as far as how to plan and knowing what you need to come up with. You know, those basin studies started in 1994. they haven't been updated. They need to be updated. I think, if you're going to go to the state and ask for grant funding and you have a plan based off a 1994 basin study, they're going to go, well, where's your new data?
Hey, Chris, let me ask you a question about that. Because I've been asked this question. So you make a good point there, but you were in that seat for 25 years. Why didn't you update them?
Because you didn't give me the money to do it. Wait, excuse me.
Well, it wasn't
you,
me. I
but
wasn't
the
here.
past board.
I wasn't there.
It wasn't you. It was the past board. You
So
spend a lot of your
you-
discretionary funds on flooding, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. But like I went to the board meeting on the 10th of October. You had $61.7 million in ARRP funds, and $1 million was set aside for drainage for the Gatewood project. That's not a very good decision. $22 million to put infrastructure, broadband internet to the north end of the county. Well, that's good, but guess what? The Congress has approved the infrastructure bill, and there's broadband in that.
Sure.
So instead of doing 22 million toward that project, do your design and then apply for a grant for that federal funding.
Well,
And
I
then
can
take
tell you,
that 20 million or 21 million and spend it on drainage.
yeah, I can tell you that will more than likely be the plan. I mean, obviously you got to throw a flaming spear in the ground and say, we've got money, we're going to go. But of course, we're going to look for every available funding source outside of that money, which is what we did on the Floridian ditch, by the way. I put $400,000
Right.
discretionary. Joy and her team went out and found the grant. So, but I that's a separate issue. Broadband is incredibly important for a number of different
Well,
reasons.
I'm not
Wes,
saying it's not important, but you got to make smart decisions when you have a higher priority. I think, in my opinion, of course, I'm
Mhm.
pretty much biased from stormwater.
Right.
I think you should spend more money on drainage, because
The point
if
I
it's the
wanna
number
make,
one
Chris,
problem, why isn't it the number one priority?
Jay, what were you saying?
the point I want to get that I agree with Chris. The point I'd love to hear, I want to hear what Wes's opinion is somebody who's like working on this and investing in the county. Wes, what's your opinion on the value of a up-to-date plan that covers the county and has an updated list of capital improvement projects based on good
Up-to-date data and information is always valuable. I mean, absolutely, it's valuable. Anytime you go off on a project and you want to start planning a project, the best data you can have, the most up-to-date data you have, the better you can plan. Absolutely.
And let me say, with HB 53, I mean, Jay, I want to answer your question too. And I think a plan is great. And I think that's a start for that to be due in July. And we have to report, with EDR working out a template and everything. I think that's the right name for them. So we've got to put that plan together, and we are working on putting a scope together so that we can get a consultant on board to at least, start that 20-year plan that we have to do every year now. And so that's a start. And I do agree that we need a plan, a holistic plan for the county to work towards, and it needs to be tweaked every year. It's going to be better for grants. We can go after it, and we need people. And you were talking earlier about that, and we have hired people to go after grants, and they've been successful, and they've done a great job for us locally. And I'm sure there's others that are even better at it to go at a higher level. And so we will need that help. We will need that information from y'all. And the county, I think, can do better with the limited funds they do get.
Well, we're working with EDP and EDR. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I was going to give you the last word because unfortunately an hour went by like that, and we could talk for hours on this topic. But Jay, I'd like to give you the last word. I know we didn't get a lot of things settled, but we got a lot of ideas out there, stream of consciousness. So please give your website and your final thoughts on what you would do if you were sat in this chair.
Right. Well, look, for people listening and come back later, flooddefenders.org. We'd love to have you involved. We need your voice. These issues obviously matter. My request, my ask for you, Jeff, and into the county, as somebody who's investing, and I live in North Carolina, but I'm investing in Florida flooding heavily. I'm investing in Escambia County. My ask is that we invest in planning, because we can't manage what you can't measure, right?
True.
Having this big amorphous blob can't be a good way to solve the problem long term. What you have right now through EDR is basically an inventory of what's out there. What you're going to see come out of this next session is going to be from the Chief Resilience Office, who has a lot of sway on where the grants go. It's going to be, you have to have updated data. We're looking for comprehensive watershed level plans. That's where the winners are going to be. They're going to be in that circle. And I want to help, but we have to invest in the people, the consultants, the resources, and it's not a lot of money compared to what's at stake and what you can get through state, federal money, bond markets, whatever. A really high return on investment. But without that, I think it's going to be really tough. That is the key to me, is the plan.
Well, I appreciate that. It's great to hear the perspective from the guy who founded the organization and your story. I appreciate you being here this morning. I know we took an hour of your time, but I appreciate your patience in being here. Chris, appreciate you being here and bringing forward.
Call me anytime.
All right, we'll do it. And of course, Eric Gilmore, Public Safety Director. Thank you, sir. Wes Marino, our County Administrator. Thank you. Enjoy. You'll be gone in a month. I certainly hope you're bringing in a strong successor. Hopefully that search is going well.
The best.
I appreciate your years of service to the county. Thanks for all your help in assisting me with the projects I've been able to get done in District 1, and just wish you the best forward. And to all of you all being here this morning, thank you. And to those who've watched, thanks for being here this morning. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for organizing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.